Hello! Welcome to Changeling Cast, the podcast dedicated to reading and dissecting urban fantasy, paranormal, and speculative romance series. I'm your host Mara from the YouTube channel Books Like Woe, and this season we are making our way through Nalini Singh's Side Changeling series. Well, everybody, today I'm very excited because we have a very exciting guest who helped inspire the format for this podcast, because you guys know that I'm trash for Ice Planet Podcast and Fated Mates. And so without further ado, we have the immortal JenReadsRomance.
I know, I was like, I need like my own theme music or something. That'd be amazing. Like a walk-up song, right? Well, okay, I'm gonna already digress. I've said this on, so I am the co-host of the Fated Mates podcast, and
yes,
I'm also a middle school teacher, and back in the before times, we would have like book talks at like the middle school assemblies, and all the people have a walk-up song if they're up there a lot. And so the guy who runs the assembly was like, what do you want your walk-up song to be? And my walk-up song actually is Every Day I Write the Book by Elvis Costello. Everyone I think should choose their own walk-up music. I think it's like a real...
Yeah. Well, so you are from Fated Mates, but how did you become a romance reader, public reviewer, etc.?
Yeah, so I have been reading romance since I was the summer before 8th grade. I found, like many people, like the bag of books. And the bag of books I found was in my grandmother's basement. Now, the irony of this is my grandma was not a reader. So I'm pretty sure someone just gave her the bag of books. You know what I mean?
And then it was languishing in the basement.
And I would read anything. And I was like, boy, what are these? And they were remaindered, which means the covers had been torn off. Like somebody gave them to her and they should have been recycled or thrown away or whatever. It was the 80s. And I was like, what are these books? This is mysterious, and they're books. So I'm going to read these books. And I was like, oh, these books are fucking great. Oh, can I swear? Is that okay? All right.
Oh, please. Okay. Yeah. Well, so you didn't have, like the, what is it, the Joanna Lindsay one with like tits?
No. You know what's funny is it was a contemporary. It was like a category romance. And many years later, and I can send you this link at some point because you'll laugh. I actually kind of figured out what the book was, because, people are like, you can figure it out. And I saw the cover for the first time, decades later. And I was like, oh, I didn't expect that that's what it looked like, but great.
Yeah, so. I had to track down my first one because it was an 80s category that was at a beach house I was staying at.
Yes.
So I did the Smart Bitches Trashy Books, that to help me find it. I have a copy.
Did you find it?
It's called The Marriage Deal. Oh, I'll show you this incredible Fimlet.
Hello, bring this over. I wonder if I have mine. Oh, I do, right here. Hold on.
You guys, we can see each other even though you can't see us, but I'll put images in the video.
Sarah Craven.
With this intense Fimlet.
Look at mine.
Oh, wow.
Pink Satin by Jeannie Grant.
That is a boob.
Yeah.
Just like a boob pillow, full-on situation.
Sure. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It honestly, that's how I discovered romance. And then I read romance. I secretly read romance for lots of years.
Yeah, of course, because misogyny.
Sure. And, as a teenager, I'm sure my mother would have been like, what the hell are you reading? And then I would say after the election in 2016, I really was like, I don't want anything sad to happen. I mean, and I kept reading romance all through. It's not like I ever stopped, but there were like kind of fits and starts or phases when times I was really into it. I got into it again in a big way when I got my first Kindle, which was in like 2009.
Because people don't have to see the covers.
Sure. And you're like, oh, and I think romance was such an early adopter to ebooks. So you could get them. And I was like, this is great. So, and then I started reviewing, I kind of was at a moment, it's like, whatever. I'm sorry. I'm telling my whole story, but you asked, so it's fine.
No, I love it.
Where I am a middle school teacher and my son was older. I had finished like a master's degree. I'm like a busybody. I like to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I felt like I was so involved in my job, but it wasn't really healthy for me. Right. So I was like, I'm going to do
Yeah.
something. What do I love? Well, I love books. So I thought, well, I could review. That would be fun for me. And book blogging was like pretty big. It was, 4 or 5 years ago,
Hmm.
probably now. And so I thought about reviewing YA, but that's like my job. I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. The whole point is to not be doing my job. So I was like, I
Yeah.
should review romance. I love romance. And here I am.
And here we
And here
are,
I am. Yeah.
which I
Good.
love. Yeah, no, I did the same thing when I got on BookTube. I was out of grad school and I was like, I want to
Yeah.
talk to somebody about books because grad school is so much like almost like a book club.
Yes.
And I was like, I miss this.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
same thing of
Yeah. Yeah. Just like, and then to have people be, and then to have like my romance reading come into the light in a way, was so awesome for me because like many romance readers, I don't know that I was ashamed of romance, but it was secret. Right.
yeah, yeah.
And maybe I was ashamed and I just don't want to say that, but it was secret. And now it is like, I will
Loud and proud.
proselytize about romance to anyone at a dinner party, whatever. So
Yep.
it's been great.
No, I was at my work book club this morning before hours, and I was mentioned casually like, yeah, I mean, I read like 250 books a year, so if I buy like 200 books, that's fine. That's not even a full year's worth. And they were like, how is that possible? And I'm like, I think you're assuming that every book I read is,
Infinite jest.
yeah, Proust or something. But I just finished the Alien Warrior King's Accountant, and that didn't take me that long to
Yeah.
read. So
Sure. One of the things Sarah said, at the beginning of the podcast once, and I was like, that sounds about right. Is she's like, I start a new romance every day.
yeah,
And, it's like I get into bed or I start a book. And if I finish it, I stay up all night and finish it. And if I don't, then I just start a next one. And I was like, that sounds actually about right to me.
I mean, we are the power readers of.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the reason that
Yeah.
publishing stays in the black. We can get through a shit ton of
Yeah, we
books.
can.
So
Sure. Bless.
well, and then so I wasn't sure if you were a reader of Changeling, and then I saw on Twitter
Yes.
you starting to talk about it,
Right.
and I was like,
I know. Okay.
I need to get her into my web. So how did we get?
Right.
It's a natural progression, I feel like, from Immortals After Dark, but like, how did we get to
Sure.
Changeling?
So here's what happened. So I read, I really like paranormal romance, right? I mean, like, have you read Morning Glory Milking Farm? Have you read this?
Yes, I have.
Hello.
And it was great.
It was fantastic, right? I was like, this is what
Yeah.
I want. I want monster fucking. It's fantastic. It's great. So,
I mean, I'm a Ruby Dixon obsessee. I just got my
look at
swag
that.
from an Etsy
Nice.
store. So yeah.
So I really like paranormal. I like I feel like there's so much pressure on historical and contemporary authors to, I think contemporary used to be real over the top, right? I'm like waving this book around again, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like some of it still is, but I feel like it's so much more realistic fiction now in some ways.
Yeah, people want it to be like, yeah, I don't know.
And
I don't need that in my fantasy time. Yeah.
Exactly. Me neither. And so I think for whatever reason, I just have always really liked paranormal. And so I read Immortals After Dark. Obviously, Sarah and I did the podcast. And then, of course, everyone's like, have you read Changelings? And I was like, at that point, kind of like, I might need a little break before I dive back into this big, huge, massive world, right? But then this is shocking to say, but romance is vast, so it happens. I had never read anything by Nalini. Nothing.
Oh.
And the first...
What a treat.
Exactly.
She is a fucking queen.
Yes,
yeah.
Right? So it was kind of like, how have I managed to like not do this, right? So the first book I actually read by her was I read the Rock series.
Yeah, which is really, I feel like it's undersung because I think that they're really fun contemporaries that are...
And I loved them. I super loved them. And so then I was like, I'm going to give these Changelings a chance. Now, everyone knows I have a best friend, Kelly. What people do not know is I have another really good friend named Kelly who I did Teach for America with. Because, once you're...
So there's best friend Kelly, good friend Kelly, and then do we have like acquaintance Kelly? Like how many Kellys are we talking about here?
Kelly and Seattle, not best friend Kelly, my TFA friend Kelly, she loves fantasy. And when we did TFA together, like, and I don't remember this as much. Like, she was like, at one point I was like, I don't know if I've ever read. And she's like, you've read it because I gave it to you. And we read it in Houston together. And I was like, oh, okay. But she really loved The Immortals After Dark, and then immediately flipped to Side Changelings and was like, Jen, I love this, right? And so
Yes.
and she's like, you really have to read it. But what ended up happening is I still was kind of on the fence, and a million other things were happening. But then we recorded an episode of Fated Mates on Morality Chain.
Yeah.
And
which is a very good episode.
Thank you. And what everybody said was, and I mean everybody, was like, if you are going to do Morality Chain, you have to talk about Heart of Obsidian.
Which is my 10th all-time favorite book, probably. It's definitely my favorite in this series, and God,
now listen,
just iconic.
I have no fear, and I was like, great, I'm going to read this fucking book. So I started with Heart of Obsidian. That was fine, and I was like, I don't exactly know what's going on, but Kelly can tell me when I have questions, and I love this. Whatever this is, I love it. So that's when I really was like, I should go back now and read from the beginning. Now,
yes,
I will admit to you that I did skip a few.
I mean, you didn't hear it from me. I know that I have a podcast about this series, but there are a few from books 1 through 10 that I think are skippable if people don't want to read them.
Yeah. And so Kelly was like, I was kind of like, so a couple months ago, you were like, hey, would you want to do this? And I was like, look, I'm going to tell you right now. This Hawk and Sienna business, I see it from book wherever I am.
Yeah, exactly. It gets set up in fucking book 1, which on my reread, I was like, I cannot believe that this gets called in book 1. But
and
it does.
I've been reading romance for a long time, and I was like, these two are going to end up together, and it's going to be fucking great.
I see you, Nalini. I see where this is going.
I see you. I love you. I am here for you. So when you asked if I wanted to do one, I was like, yeah, I want to do these two. I haven't read it yet. I trust it's great.
Yeah.
So as the summer was going on, and I read some, I listened to some. Mm-hmm. Kelly was kind of like, you can maybe skip this one or skip this one to kind of get me to the point where I would be, kind of have read this one in time.
Have the foundations you need to fully appreciate what a sweet payoff this is.
And that's what a lot of people said, because I was like, can I, at some point, I said to her, I was like, I think I was on, okay, titles have no meaning to me. So
yeah, no, it's kind of like Immortals After Dark, where it's like it's just like word salad.
Yes.
Of like, I don't
You're
know.
Like,
exactly.
Heart of Bloodstone, Snow,
Clay, Fire, Branded. Yeah,
but it was Ashaya's book.
Yes, that is
probably halfway.
Not Mine to Possess. It's the one after that.
It doesn't matter, but it was like 5-ish, maybe.
Oh, Hostage to Pleasure.
There you go. Look at you. See, that's what I do with IAD. I'm always like, let me think about it. And so I said to Kelly at that point, I was like, okay, I'm a little worried I'm not going to get to, whatever this one is called. I don't know. Kiss the Snow, I think. I'm worried I'm not going to get to it in time. Help me. Help me make a path.
Figure out which ones I really got to read. Yeah.
And here I am, and I'm ready, and I did my homework.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's I always recommend people go to the beginning and read through the series, because there are so many like payoff moments if you've been reading, but they definitely are strong enough. I think for the most part, you could drop in anywhere, and you won't get the full impact of, like dun dun dun, like we've been waiting for this reveal, or we've been waiting for this couple, or whatever. But like, it's, I think she does enough of the sort of like previously on Side Changeling that you can kind of figure out where we are.
I will also say she is really masterful at that, because it is really hard, I think, to not do the info dump. You know what I mean? Where you're kind of like, okay, now this is the 2 pages where the author is kind of summarizing book 7 or whatever. She's so great at that.
Yeah.
So I found, I feel like I know what's going on. And it's the other thing I'm going to say before we start that's really interesting. Everyone knows I love Immortals After Dark, but we are 18 books in or whatever. And at one point I said to Sarah, I was like, When do you think, have you read it? Have you read this series? Have you read again?
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I'm fully caught up.
Okay.
I'm waiting for, what is it,
Monroe.
Monroe, like everyone else
Light a
is.
candle for Monroe. Exactly. Who knows? We'll be blessed if it happens. And if not, here we are. But at one point I said to her, I was like, when do you think the like a session's gonna start? And she's like, don't you think it has? And I was like, has it? Like that. Right. Whereas one thing I really like about this series is
Yes.
the progress through like the Signet and the counselors, all of that plot is really moving through the background in a way where like IAD
Yes.
really is not committed. And I'm not saying that's a bad or a good thing. It's just an
No,
observation, right?
it's just different. And I think, so for me, the highs in Immortals After Dark are very high, but there are definite lows. And I think the fact that I read Changeling before
Interesting.
I read Immortals After
Yeah.
Dark, and I also read the Kate Daniels series before I read Immortals After
Right.
Dark. I think that kind of spoiled me for getting the full,
Right.
like fully loving it, because I got so used to an author who's just like, no, like I have the full
Right.
vision of like point A to point B.
Right.
I know how the world building side of this works.
Right.
I know what the macro plot is.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get through there. And you know, I think you guys have talked about this, but it's very clear Kresley Cole kind of worked her way into being like, oh, this is a cool world,
Yeah.
and I could do more with
Right.
this.
Right.
Right. So yeah. But anyway.
Yeah.
So you were ready for Kiss of Snow because you got some of the anticipatory
Oh yeah, completely
build up, as we've all had, waiting for Hawk
I also
to get his head out of his ass.
Oh God, yes. I will also say there's no greater joy as a romance reader than coming to a series when it is 25 books in.
Oh,
right? Because
yeah.
the very idea of like sitting around and waiting for this book to drop must have been, I mean, unreal, right?
Oh, the first time I read this, it was after grad school and I was unemployed, so I was looking for a job, and I read this entire series in 2 weeks.
Oh yeah.
And it was up through book 14. So luckily I didn't have to wait for this book, because I don't think I could have waited for this or book 12. Like I just
yeah, you've got to think that everybody was like grabby hands, like give it to me. Right?
Yeah. Like yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to subject Jen to our normal plot recap. I'll insert that later. So I'm going to throw you guys to future me recapping the book. So, as teased, this is Hawk and Sienna's book. And, oh, guys, we've just been waiting for this for so long, and it finally comes along, and it's such a satisfying book. So basically, we join the action where, if you'll recall in the last book, we had our first kind of battle between the Psy and the Changelings, like an out-and-out sort of like actual pitched battle of some kind, led by Pure Psy, which is headed by Henry Scott. And so this is kind of picking up in not quite exactly where we left off. It's been a few months, but pretty close to where we were in Play of Passion. And really, this is a lot, in terms of the macro plot, a lot of this is a ramp up to a full-on battle that is going to happen on Snowdancer territory of the Pure Psy attacking Snowdancer. So that is a lot of the sort of macro plot, and kind of overall structuring of the book is a slow but steady ramp up of tension and escalation between the various members of the alliance of kind of the San Francisco greater area. So we have Snowdancer, Dark River, Nikita, and Anthony kind of on one side, and then we have Pure Psy / Henry Scott and Shoshana Scott on the other. So Pure Psy starts sort of sending like these little mini attacks into Snowdancer territory, and they are successful at hurting, but not, I don't believe they actually managed to kill anyone in these little kind of mini attacks. And Sienna, who is our heroine in this book, is the one who recognizes that this is actually a Ming Laban military strategy. So we get the insinuation that perhaps Ming Laban is kind of siding with the Scots, or at least behind the scenes, but she helps the Alliance kind of come up with some counterattacks, or she's able to correctly predict some of the moves from Pure Psi based on that. All of this leads up, well, I should mention they go to this compound that the Pure Psi have in South America. Sienna and Judd do that, and they rig it with a bunch of explosives, which they later set off. They also have counterattacks against sort of kind of symbolic places for each of the counselors who were on the other side. So they attack Henry, his kind of location in London. Shoshana has I forget exactly where hers is. It's in Dubai. She has something in Dubai. And then there's a sort of symbolic sculpture that Tatiana has that is destroyed. So they definitely get some strikes back at the other side. This culminates in a battle between the Snowdancer pack and Pure Psi, like a full-on battle. Backtracking to the kind of romance happening in this book, just to give you the full impact of why this battle is so fucking epic, is basically Hawk has kind of hit the end of his rope in terms of his ability to resist Sienna, and she has run out of patience waiting for him to make his move. So there's a lot of sort of tit for tat back and forth of Sienna trying to get him to see her as a woman and someone he can be with, and Hawk resisting that. Hawk is going to kind of take out some of his sexual tension with a packmate that he has occasionally had as a lover, and so he's planning on doing that, but before he can, Sienna goes out to the bars twice and is dancing very enticingly, and twice he comes to carry her out and make it clear that he's not going to stand for that. So basically there's a real battle of wills between them going on, of her basically saying, you cannot treat me like I am yours if you are not actually going to be with me. That is not reasonable, and I will not stand for it. And Hawk dithers and goes back and forth, but around the 40 to 50% way through the book, he kind of gives in to the fact that yes, he is going to court her. So that kind of moves their relationship to the next level. Then the kind of tension between them becomes, can Sienna accept the fact that Hawk will never fully mate with her? He believes that he cannot be her mate because his mate died before, when they were children, before any kind of mating bond could be established. Sienna pushes back pretty hard on this idea and says that no, you could mate me, but you will not let yourself be vulnerable in that way again, and so you won't. But eventually they come to an agreement, kind of a meeting of the minds, and she basically says, okay, if you give me everything else, then I can accept this position in your life, even if we are not technically fully mates, and Hawk agrees to that. So they also have had, this is a very sexy book, especially considering that they don't actually fully have sex until I think the 75 or 80% mark, because he finds out pretty early that she is still a virgin, and so he is sort of wanting to take his time with ramping up their sexual encounters. That finally happens. It is very steamy. And then they also have kind of this agreement between them. So they have sex, and they also kind of come to this agreement about that they will not be technically mates, but that they are going to be partners, and that they're, going to be completely basically almost like the equivalent of if humans got married, like that is going to be the relationship. So the pack has this lovely gesture of making a cabin for the two of them to kind of have some away time. Like they kind of quickly put up this little cabin in the woods. They have another sexy night there. But at the end of it, Sienna realizes that she is about to hit critical mass with her designation, which is the X designation. So that's the other kind of macro thing happening in the background, is that Sienna is the only X Psi who has lived past the age of 16. She is also the only known X Cardinal that has ever lived. And so while she has been able to manage that part of her ability somewhat up till this point, it is essentially there's going to hit a tipping point, which is called synergy, and at that point she will she will self-immolate and also possibly destroy the entire continent that she's on, because it will be just like this cataclysmic explosion. And she is rapidly hitting kind of these tipping points of energy over and over again. And after her night with Hawk in this cabin, she thinks she's going to have to essentially go up into the woods to die. They have this big confrontation about it, but basically she thinks she's kind of hit this critical point. And so by the time the actual battle between the Psy and the Changelings is happening, she is almost at critical mass again. And so basically she decides that she's going to go out trying to protect the Changelings. So the Psy have brought this sonic weapon that is essentially disabling most of the Snowdancer troops. There are also troops from Dark River down in San Francisco trying to hold that territory. Like, there's this whole big old battle that's happening, and we hit this critical point where Snowdancer looks like they may be lost because of the sonic weapon. And Sienna fucking Lauren walks down from the woods, flames ablaze, because basically being an X is being this kind of specific type of cold fire. So she is like consumed in fire. The entire Snowdancer area or like teams are like, what the fuck? Like they did not realize what a fucking badass Sienna is. She comes out like full glory. She kills Henry Scott, or she at least, I think, mortally wounds him. He tries to teleport away. Not clear what happened with that. She kills him, and then she wants to use her fire to destroy the Psy, but she doesn't want to hurt any of the Changelings, so she essentially, Hawk runs at her, and she has an ability to keep the flames from hurting herself, and also hurting kind of whoever's within her shields. So what she does is she goes into Hawk's mind and seizes control of him, and is able then to locate every Snowdancer in the area and bring them within her shields. So then she unleashes her fucking fire and destroys all of the Psy. Like, it is scorched earth, motherfucker. Like, it is full. Sorry, this scene is so satisfying because people have just been underestimating Sienna for 10 books, and finally she gets to just show like, oh no, I am with what we know of the total world, she is the second deadliest Psy on the planet. And so everybody kind of has this shock and awe moment. After that, though, she is about to hit synergy, and Hawk goes kind of balls to the wall and initiates a mating bond. Like, he realizes that he can do it, and he does it. She is furious because she's like, I'm gonna die, and now you're gonna die too. Like, the only consolation she had was at least we're not mates, so that when I die, he won't die. But of course, he can't hold himself back. So while everybody is sort of trying to tend to their wounded, Sienna's force is building up again and again. She's about to hit critical mass. Her and Hawk cling to each other, and they run to the lake to try to dull the impact of her fire, but somehow she doesn't self-immolate. She doesn't die. It's because, and this is set up so brilliantly, guys, it's so satisfying because all the pieces of this have been laid beforehand. I should mention Alice Eldridge, who's been teased for the last few books. She's the one who wrote that book about the E's. The ghost helps Judd track. He thought he was looking for her manuscript about X's, but turns out she never actually wrote any of it down, but somebody captured her and cryogenically froze her. So they actually have Alice Eldridge herself, who is in the infirmary. They're trying to wake her up. They manage to briefly wake her up, and all she says is, find the valve. And what that is that psychically, an X needs to have kind of a accompanying valve to their power, and Walker, we know, has this weird thing in his mind that looked like some sort of blip in his telepresence, his telepathic presence, but actually it was this valve that started developing when Sienna was born, and basically it takes her energy and feeds it back through to whatever net she is hooked up to whatever net they're hooked up to. So since she is now mated to Hawk, the Lauren net is subsumed into the overall Snowdancer network that all the lieutenants are tied to Hawk through their blood oath. So all of the Laurens are in that same group now, and all of the power that Sienna releases is getting filtered through this piece of Walker's mind, and they have this discussion about how essentially the neo-sentience of that network, of that telepathic network, essentially knows that Sienna needs that release, and so it kind of is adapting itself to her needs. And again, this is set up so well because we knew that this was a thing Walker had. We've known from the Shine Foundation that psi abilities are flexible, that psi networks are flexible, but because of silence and kind of this insistence on sort of like pure breeding psi, a lot of that knowledge has been lost. And what we see is that basically this new network has adapted to the needs of one of its members, and that is Sienna. So it's so satisfying. So a shit ton of energy goes through all of the lieutenants. They all have a ton of energy. All of the healers who are getting their, extra boost from Hawk are able to heal everyone. They're all like the Energizer Bunny. Everybody's fucking because they like have all this excess energy. It's a nice light comedic moment after a lot of heaviness. So we get that. I should also mention that there's been a secondary romance in this book going on between Walker, who is Judd's brother, Sienna's uncle, and the other adult Lauren who left, who fled the Signet and sought refuge at Snowdancer. And he and Laura, who is the Snowdancer healer, have a little side romance, and we're going to see more of them in a future book. So that's also very sweet and lovely because he thinks he's too broken to love her, but like she makes him realize that she loves him just the way he is, and he has a very kind of almost maternal energy to him. But this book is we learn a lot about like the strength that comes with that because he has been a teacher, and we find out that he was the teacher of the arrows. So basically he was the teacher to all the little psi assassins, like the most deadly psi in the net. And that was part of how he taught Judd to protect himself, that, he has all of these little tricks and tips about how to essentially use your telepathy and different psychic abilities in ways to undermine those who are trying to control people. So anyway, we get a whole side romance with him and Laura, which is very cute and satisfying, and we will have a novella in the future with them. So at the end of this book, Sienna and Hawk are finally together. They are fully mates, so she is the mated pair to him. And we also have this lovely moment where they go to their cabin together, and he does a full mea culpa of like, I wasn't listening, or I didn't want to make myself vulnerable again, and I couldn't confront that. And when you tried to confront me with that, I pushed you away, and that was my bad. And I'm sorry, and I love you, and I want to be with you forever. So it's this lovely little, like, small grovel moment. Oh, okay, so I think that's what you need to know about plot. Now back to me and Jen's discussion. And then we're back. Well done. We're back from a little plot recap. So, okay. I mean, I have so many thoughts about this book. And so did you get to read Play of Passion, which is the book right before this?
No, that's what well, no, okay. Wait, hold on. I think
it's Drew and Indigo.
Okay, I'm going to admit to you, I read half of it, but then this week I was like, I gotta. So I do think I will be interested to see your thoughts once you've read it, because reading them back to back now, I'm like, these really are kind of the same book, but opposite. Okay.
It's like Drew and Indigo have like the same age and sort of power dynamic, with the female being the older more dominant. And it's called Play of Passion. And it is a much more playful book. Yeah. And this book feels like the same conflict in some ways, but like the angstier, just like rip your heart out version of it.
Well, listen, I'm going to say something, and that's because I think in any book where like a man is in his feelings, like I can't love
which is what
anyone.
This book is.
That's when
it's like I can have pants feelings, but I cannot have heart feelings. And it's like, that, my friend, you can have them both at the same time.
That is when these books are super angsty, right? Which I love, because I think it's one of the greatest things about romance is, we like, the accusation from the outside is always like, you're going to give people unrealistic expectations or whatever. And I'm just like, no, listen, I just want to read about feelings. And if it's someone who is basically like, I don't have feelings, listen, even better. And I'm going to confess this now so that everybody knows I am absolute garbage for like a possessive, predatory,
Mhm.
changeling male
Yeah.
dragging women out of bars and being angry when she flirts with people. And look, I know it's wrong and I don't.
And biting his neck.
No,
Yeah.
listen. It is all I want. All I want.
So would you say that because this is a conversation I had
Yeah.
with my friend Bethany when we talked about Crest by Ice, which is Judd's book,
Oh,
which is her favorite and is definitely my top three, I'd
yeah,
say.
for me
Uh,
too.
so are you a change? So I do think that the Psy and the Changelings represent two archetypal romance
Yeah.
heroes. We've got the Psy who represent like men who are totally cut off from their
Right.
feelings. And sort of the journey of the book is the woman introducing him
Right.
to his feeling side and like
Right.
showing him the depth of emotion he never knew he had.
Right.
Whereas the changelings are sort of the archetypical,
Oh
like
yeah.
completely sexually confident, and they're going to, you
Right.
know, draw the women into this new world of lust
Sure.
and whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm decidedly like the Psy hero tends to be my preferred
Interesting.
hero type. But I'm hearing that you're
Yeah.
more of a kind of like changeling, like tempestuous,
Oh yeah, for sure. I think
dominant
so.
man.
Here's what I will say. I feel like it's hard to make I do like the Changeling books a lot. I would say I'm more drawn to them in a lot of ways. I think part of it though too, because look, Judd's book I loved. So it's not
Yeah.
always that I could make that thing. But what I do really love about the Changeling books though is the pack. Right?
Okay, yes, we have a whole rating scale for cozy community vibes
Yes.
because I think that is something
Right.
Nalini. It's like they're sci-fi, political thriller romances,
Right.
but they're cozy.
Yes.
Somehow.
Yes. So I think part of the reason the books that are like one of the books I skipped. Okay, again, I think one of the books I skipped. Whatever came before Play of Passion was two Psy. Is that right?
Okay,
Or
so
no, the one I skipped.
there's Branded by Fire, which is Riley and
Oh no,
Mercy.
that one's
So
fucking
that's
great.
two
I love that one.
changelings,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a that book
That was
is
a great one
awesome.
too. Yeah.
Then you have Blaze of Memory, which is
That's the one I skipped.
he's one of the
Yes.
forgotten and a Psy.
And
if you want some angst, if you want some sick lit angst, that book will make you weep. Even though it's not one of my favorites, it is very
because I started it. I
angsty.
actually really stalled out on that one. And it's the only one that I would say I skipped when I couldn't get into it. Now,
It's
yeah.
real slow.
Yeah.
It's
And
it and the next one, Bonds of Justice. Both of them, I feel like they don't really get going into the second half.
And I think I might skip that one too. So,
which I think
yeah,
is okay.
those are the ones.
I'm sorry, everyone. You know, I love them. I do still love them, but I think you could skip 7 and 8 and probably be okay.
You should meet Kelly because Kelly was like, skip these two. And I was like, okay, thank you. Because I was because she'd sort of every once in a while be like, how you doing? Where are you? And I'd be like, oh my God. Fuck. I mean, listen, Judd and Brenna. Okay. Also,
a cultural reset.
Riley and Mercy.
Judd.
Hello.
Yeah.
So those books were really great for me. So I think, kind of am more drawn to the changelings. But I think part of it is because I do like that like warm pack atmosphere where the ones where, they're just like, I don't know, drifting around the Psy net. I'm like, I don't really get what's going on here. I'm not smart enough, maybe.
Yeah. So, I think that it is interesting. I don't want to spoil things for people who haven't gotten there yet. So in my opinion, the like prime time of this series is books 9 through 14.
Yeah.
So we're like in peak, awesome Psy changeling time. And starting in book 12, which I know you've read, you start how to say this in a way that doesn't spoil things for people. I think that there becomes a sense of community within the Psy that then is giving you some of that same cozy enjoyment.
Yes.
So, but up until that point, like for instance, in books 7 and 8, which do have Psy in them, they are just sort of like
like they're loners, right?
Yeah,
it feels.
I mean, tragically so,
right.
but
of course.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I will tell you. So IAD Jen, right? Like I said, I'm garbage for your alpha male bullshit.
Yeah.
So
which Hawk has.
Listen.
In spades. he has
And
nothing
you
but alpha male
start off
bullshit.
with Lucas and Sasha. You get that alpha male bullshit out of the way right
Yes.
away. And then I was immediately like, okay, but when is this fellow's book going to arrive? That's how I felt.
Mhm.
So I was really reading up to this book. And I will say, one of the big fears I always have when you're like, okay, I cannot wait to get to this character's book, is that it's not going
Yeah.
to be that good. And I will tell you, this book is terrific. I
It
loved it.
delivers.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm even just trying to think of like where to start
I
with
know.
the things that I love about this book. Okay, one of the I will say, so I do enjoy alpha male bullshit. Obviously, I'm a reader of speculative romance.
Sure.
I have to like that to some degree. I will say it's not my catnip
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like the heroine is a pushover.
Right. She has to be his
Like I
equal.
don't.
Right.
Yeah. So part of what I love about this book is that Sienna is such a fucking badass. Even though she's only 19, 20,
Right.
she has lived a life. She has her own like I mean on a psychic level she's obviously incredibly powerful, and this is also the big reveal of
What
like
that means.
she's an
Yeah.
X. Oh my god, like we know that the X's can't live.
Right.
So she has her own journey, and I love the sort of like stand and deliver moment at the end really
Oh,
buys the entire book for me
yes.
when she's like, behold my fire,
Yeah.
watch me
Watch me.
completely.
Yeah. That shit was biblical. I was super into it. I also loved, I think the other thing, kind of midway through the book, the other thing I really liked a lot. So again, I love your alpha male bullshit, but there's a point where Judd's like, she's going to go with me to go infiltrate the
Mm-hmm.
first Psy camp or whatever.
Yeah.
And he is like, yes, she is the best person for this. And I think that's the other reason it works for me is when he's like, yes, I have a bunch of alpha male bullshit, but I respect what you can do. And
Yes.
so that was, I think, part of the reason it really worked is, he very quickly has to get over the fact that he thinks she's too young or whatever. And that part where, he says to Judd, like, why aren't you protecting her? And Judd's like, listen, she's made it through some things. She can handle you. Right?
Yeah. She survived Ming fucking Laban.
Yes,
I think she's capable.
right.
Yeah.
So I really think that is the reason that it works, is she's such a strong character herself.
Yeah.
But yeah, his alpha male bullshit is though sublime. It really is.
It is. I mean, I will say, I think the other reason that he doesn't. So I love this book in terms of it feels very satisfying of the arc of where these characters have been going as a whole.
Yeah.
He doesn't have my whole heart the way I think he does a lot of people because for some reason, and this is a very obscure reference, well, maybe not obscure, but a weird reference.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see How I Met Your Mother? Were you a watcher
Yes.
of How I Met Your Mother?
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, the first time I read this book, I was picturing Hawk initially as the James Vanderbeek character on How I Met Your Mother,
Okay.
who is the weird, like, alpha, like, jock band guy that Robin fell in love with in Canada. Okay. And so I never totally have gotten that. Like, he always feels a little bit like, I'm not like other alphas.
Right.
Like, and in a way that doesn't. I know that's not what's on the page, so I try to put it out of my mind. But for some reason,
you know what?
I'm just constantly seeing James Vanderbeek being a douchebag, and I'm like, you don't deserve this, Sienna.
It for sure. I am picturing something more like Henry Cavill with his thighs of steel.
Oh, I much prefer that, like the Witcher with the flowing blonde.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to redirect my imagination in that direction.
Need to have a new plan. But I also think, I mean, here's the other thing. I think a really charming thing about in any paranormal, but especially in the Changeling packs, is in a contemporary romance, sometimes that alpha male bullshit is like they're like a loner, you know what I mean? But like the way he will play with like the pups, the kids.
Very true.
The way he takes care of everybody. I feel like the brilliance of this portrayal is that we see we see like the burden, but also what he gets back from them. Like they build, listen, his
Mm-hmm.
whole clan builds him and Sienna a love shack out in the woods. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really nice. And I think that's why the other reason why the alpha male bullshit is not too much, because we also see him comforting people and playing with
Mm-hmm.
kids and, all that stuff. I think really it gives him kind of a depth that I think is missing in other books like this sometimes.
Yes, I agree because I think a lot of times the alpha male bullshit manifests essentially in kind of an over the top
Yes.
ego as really the defining experience of that character.
Yeah.
Whereas all of these alpha males are all protective
Yeah.
alphas. So it's never a I'm big and strong just so that I can be intimidating or
Right.
stroke my own ego. It's because I want to,
Yes.
protect. And that is always the emphasis is,
Sure.
care of others. And eventually that extends to the care of their heroines.
Right. And I think, he like relies on his lieutenants. He listens to
Mm-hmm.
people. They like plan and plot together. I mean, so like I mean, again, though, this is Nalini being so brilliant and so good at her job,
Yeah.
because it doesn't have to be this way. Like, right, she decided to make it
Mm-hmm.
this way. I've read books with like alpha males where you don't see as much caring, but it is really so explicit here. And I mean, I'm sorry, his whole like I mean, okay, this I kind of got a little teary several times when reading this book,
Oh,
right?
1000%. I cry every time I read this.
Like the part where he describes like how like the first time he recognizes like Rissa, I guess his mate, when he was a little
Mm-hmm.
boy, and his mom
Yes.
describes him like running, just like taking off running. Like, listen,
Yes.
that is
It angst so good
yes.
because it's like I think that's part of why I can deal with this version of alpha male bullshit
Yeah.
because it's like, okay, yeah, like if you are in a world where the rules of your world are, I've been mated once,
Right.
I can't again.
Right.
It's not just that he's withholding his heart to be
Yeah.
cruel or because he can't confront his own feelings. Now, I do think by the end he's able to admit, and I appreciate the grovel in this,
Yeah.
that he was not fully confronting the realities of his own
Right.
feelings. But it's not just purely like, I'm allergic to emotion, I
Yes.
can't deal with this. It was coming from a real place of grief and
Yeah.
loss and saying, like, it's not that I don't want to give this to you. I literally think
I
I
can't. I
can't.
mean, and what happens to his parents and the whole pack. So, I mean, I think in that way, I love a broken hero. He is super broken. I love a heroine backed into a corner, and she is literally backed into the ultimate corner. So, I mean, this book, I will tell you, really hit all of my
All of
buttons.
your catnip.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, it was great. But there are a lot of times I like laughed when reading this book, or I like sort of cheered. Like the part where she's like, "You have to let me go," or this is like, "You have to let me go do
Yes.
this thing," and he's like, "I don't know if I can," and she says like, "I was made for war." I mean,
Yes.
I was like, "God damn! Imagine I was made for war."
I, oh,
Yeah,
and just that's how she sees that to me is her journey in this book
yeah,
is, and it's really been her journey throughout the whole series of, it's not just, so Judd's journey was, I think I'm utterly incapable of
yes,
emotion. Oh, Brenna, you're teaching me that I have
right,
it. And hers is more, I know I'm capable of emotion, but is sort of like my ultimate
right,
destiny to be an object of pain.
yeah,
And like, is that my
right,
sort of end is to just, live this short life,
right,
be a weapon and die?
right. That's like
And can I seize joy in the
sure.
meantime? And her realizing, or in the satisfaction of like, you can seize joy and you're going to get to live because
Yes.
Nalini Singh is a plot genius who figures out how to make it satisfying and like,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing I was thinking. So, narratively speaking, one of the things that I can sometimes get a little fussy with is, so it's like 10 books and like we know she's an ex, but we don't really know what that means. And sort of my frustration with that. But, I say things to my students all the time. I'm like, people don't explain things they already know to themselves.
Yeah.
right? They don't.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways it made sense to me. Like it worked for me. I think that sort of, what
Yes.
is she really? What is this designation really? What is it going to mean? And so I think that I really found myself really like loving the way it all plays out. I think it's ironic that a book that is about like a fire starter essentially is this like total slow burn. Fine. But I also really liked that because I generally hate a slow burn. I'm like, just get these two
Oh, whereas like I love it. It can
oh
burn
no, see, not
all
me. What
day.
was the book? Was it Riley and Mercy where they like get to it pretty early in the book?
Yeah, the first scene is like they've been kind of dancing around each other, so they're finally like, you know what? Let's go to Pound Town and
Yeah. And
bang it out. They think they're gonna bang it
I
out.
was like, right the fuck on. This is what I like.
Yeah.
But I really ended up, here's, I think, why it kind of worked. One is there is no cessation of that tension between them. It is
Right.
nonstop. And I think that it was so clear that he was really trying to respect like her boundaries, not in a way that it was like,
Hmm.
you don't know what you want, but in a way of like, can you really, I know what I'm going to be like once we do this, but are you ready? And I ended up really liking it for that, in that way, which surprised me because I was like really sort of expecting a similar like pattern, but in that way it was really different, that it takes them, it's like 75 or 80% before they finally do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang. But
Well, and I think that she does a good job. I find that was also true with Judd's book,
yeah,
where they end up feeling like pretty sexy books, even though
yes.
when you kind of look back on it, you're like, they didn't actually
Well,
get to it till later,
sure.
but there's so much
Right.
tension and there's so
Right.
many like steps
Sexy
of
isn't about sex, right? It
right,
can be, but
exactly.
not always. And in this case, that sense of them like wanting to be together, but like needing to be apart, and him like, I gotta go run in the woods so that I can't. Okay, great. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to go run off my boner,
Yeah.
basically. It's like, honey, I don't think that's how that works,
Sure,
but
you
sure, go for
try.
it.
But all of that I think was really, so perfectly done in this book. I loved it. Loved it, loved it.
Yeah. Well, and she, in terms of the narrative and it feeling earned, in the reread, I've appreciated seeing how she does have little mentions of X earlier in the
Yeah.
series. And I think she's so good at presenting situations. I think Alona Andrews is also very good at
Yes.
this, where there's situations where it's like, I completely buy how impossible this situation is,
Right.
but you find a solution to that doesn't feel cheap
Yes.
and like it totally made all of that tension feel
Right.
unearned. It's like, oh, okay, you have a huge problem,
Right.
but you thought of an even bigger solution that really
Yeah.
works. And for me, I felt like that really
Yes.
paid off in this book of,
Yeah.
okay, I really buy that she has a way she can live. I really buy that they can be mates. I
Yes.
really buy
Yeah.
that
Right.
they truly do have a way to move
And that
forward.
their mating is literally gonna like remap the bonds of the
Yes,
entire pack. And of course, it has to
exactly.
be. He's the alpha. Like it has, that happened with Lucas and Sasha, and so it shouldn't have surprised us, right? Like I think she lays the groundwork right at the beginning for like when an alpha mates, the whole pack structure is going to be different. And I think
Yes,
that it obviously solves a lot of problems in terms of plotting and what's coming, but I also think it's just this amazing way of letting us know like something really different has happened. This isn't like a typical mating, but that so I was super into that as well. I just thought that whole thing was so, I didn't at all feel cheated, right? Like I just felt like,
exactly.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is what I want. And I think I'm going to just say like one more thing about that. In a romance, I'm always kind of trying to define, because I think now there's a lot of books that are marketed as like rom-coms and they're not really romance, or
Yeah,
there's
there's a lot of like heavy romantic
right.
elements in a book that is then marketed as
And
a romance.
that there's no and and then people will be like, well, if there's an HA, it's a romance. I'm like, okay, but central love story matters too. So I'm constantly in my own brain trying to like noodle out like what makes something a romance versus romance adjacent. And again, this might be different for different people. But one of the things that is really important to me as a reader is that these main characters, whatever the problem is between them, is solved by them together. Right. And
Yes.
that's why I love the ending of this, right? Like
Yeah.
the problem of their mating is solved in this like moment of crisis where they're each trying to protect each other, and something snaps into
Mhm.
place that would not have if they had not both been at that crisis point, I guess. And I mean, it's a lot
Yes.
more dramatic in a paranormal, but this is, it's really important to me as a reader. I am not as satisfied if she had just been like, okay, I'm going to be stay safe in the woods while everybody else fights. I would have been like, what the
Yeah.
hell? No, that cannot be the way it works, right? And I
Right.
think that that is another thing that's so brilliant about the end of this book. Like, just really, like, of course they're going to end up mated, but how? And then I was like, oh, this is
Mhm.
everything I wanted, right?
Yeah. I think it's the most satisfying kind of just every piece clicking into place that we've had in the series since the first book,
Mm-hmm.
because it was the same feeling I had in the first book of like, how is Sasha going to get out of the sign out? Like, what
How
is
is it
going to
going to
happen?
happen?
And it's so satisfying, and you feel like it's very
Right.
earned. It to me it was that same level. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it's the two designations of psi that are like everybody thinks are extinct,
Yes. Right.
each of them, and kind of the tensions that each of those designations brings to the ultimate resolution of that. Man, yeah, this book has a lot of. I'm sitting here like,
Yeah, it's
okay, I
so
see the
good.
parallels to book one.
Yeah.
I see the parallels. Have you read any of the novellas? Because they are excellent. If you
So
haven't,
I haven't, but I'll tell you, Kelly was like, they're great. And
yeah, yeah.
my suspicion is it Cooper?
Oh,
Listen,
yes, that's in the next episode that we're doing,
and I
and
was
it
like,
is probably my favorite
and
novella in the whole
there
series.
was like some hint of it, I guess, in the previous book,
Book
maybe.
9,
Yeah. And I was like,
yes.
oh, I like
Yep.
his alpha bullshit. So
Yep.
I
Oh, that's
imme-
all that novella is alpha bullshit.
immediately, I will tell you this, immediately after finishing this one tonight, I was like, after I'm done recording, I could go read about Cooper. That's what I thought,
You please
because
do.
I love that alpha bullshit. I do.
It's so that's
Okay.
9.5. And then 10.5 is an expansion of Laura and Walker, who we've not really talked
We're gonna
about,
get there.
but who I also
Yeah.
love. But they have like a sort of extension of their happily ever after is
Okay,
10.5.
cool. I definitely would
Oh,
like to check
both of
those
them are
out.
so
Yeah.
good. But point 5 before Slave to Sensation is Nate and Tammy getting
Oh,
together.
okay.
And they have the exact same conflict that
Yeah.
Hawk and Sienna have, because Nate is 10 years older
Okay.
than
Yeah.
Tammy, and he recognizes that she's his mate when she's 15.
Yeah.
And he's 25.
He's like, oh, I
And
can't do
so
it.
it's the same, like, you're too young, I can't have you,
Listen,
like that whole
if she
thing.
wrote
So there's
those
that.
books now, for sure, at some point when they were fucking, she would have called him daddy, and all of us would have been like,
I
fine,
would. I was gonna say
fine.
she could still do that.
It's
She writes short stories for her
yeah,
newsletter.
it's
And
not too late.
Nalini, if you're
It's not
listening
too
to
late
this,
for
like,
daddy. We're all
it's
ready.
not too late.
Someone out there right now is like,
Give Roman
no.
and Jules a little brother sister,
Oh,
and maybe
funny.
have her call him daddy while they're getting to it.
Yeah.
So there's that resonance. The next one is about Tangle of Need is number 11. That is one with Riaz,
Oh, yeah.
who found his mate, and she was with someone else, so he can never be with her. So it's about like, can he find love
Yeah.
after that? So sort of that same
Yeah.
parallel with Hawk thinking. So anyway, I'm just real as we're talking, I'm like, yeah, this book,
That's up.
it
Yeah.
it ties in also just thematically and sort of plot wise very well with the series as a whole.
Right. Okay, here's a couple other things. Okay, back to I love the pack. I really liked how the kind of support that Sienna got from other pack members, right?
Oh yeah,
Like,
that's a great
like
point.
them like giving her like the sexy dress, or like, like kind of hinting she should do X, Y, or Z, right? Like this sense of them all knowing that the time had come for Hawk to, like, they all knew, Like, they all
Yeah,
knew.
they're like, "You're literally destabilizing our
Yeah,
pack
like,
hierarchy because
yes,
you are so frustrated.
right.
This is gonna boil over."
And I really, really liked I loved all that, right? I,
Yeah.
like, super loved that sense of everyone doing things in their own way, to help them get together. And,
Yes.
almost
Including
yes.
Sasha.
Yeah.
I really love that connection, that sort of
Yes.
like sisterly, somewhat maternal connection that they have. And again,
Right.
the parallels between book one and this one of Sasha being like, "Girl, I've been there.
Yes, God, no
Let me
one
tell you
knows
what
like
you need
I
to know."
know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that part I think was awesome. And I also really loved the return to like the Lauren family. I mean, so,
Yes.
getting a sense really of like what Walker's like real role. I
Oh,
mean, and now again, I'd skipped some, so
yes.
I was kind of like, oh, yeah, that kind of came out of nowhere for me. The part where, he'd been just a teacher, and I was like, oh no, he taught the baby assassins.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh
Right.
no, he was a teacher to
Yeah.
the deadliest people in the entire world.
Right,
That was
right,
his job.
right. So and then, Toby and Marley?
Marley.
Yeah, like,
Mhm.
right, them getting older and, this whole idea that in the beginning, and I mean, I've read them all pretty fast, not in 2 weeks, right? A couple
Yeah.
months or whatever. The idea that
Well, you have an actual
yeah,
job, so you have other
you
things
know,
to focus
but,
on.
like, the whole thing about the sigh, you know, and silence and how dangerous feelings were to them. So, in that book one, you're kind of like, how is this going to work out for these folks? And then
Mhm.
as you see them becoming a part of the pack, I really
Mhm.
found myself completely won over to this idea that, like, oh no, like they're great. It's great for them in the pack.
Yeah. Well, and Walker, so and I guess maybe this could get into a parallel. Parenting is always an interesting topic, I feel like, in these
Mhm.
stories because especially for the Psy, that you should never assume that a Psy parent it won't be ride or die for their
Right,
kids because they're in this impossible situation as a parent where they cannot show their children, they
right,
can't outwardly show that they care about their children on a deep
right.
level. And so, with Nikita in this book, we get a
Yes,
hint. We've been getting more and more hints about how,
right.
Nikita seems like a
Oh
completely
yeah,
cold-hearted bitch. But the more the series goes on, you realize like she's a cold-hearted bitch
yeah,
for Sasha
right,
because she's like, I have to
right,
be able to protect my
right,
daughter. But and then we see with Walker that he's very maternal, like
right.
he's
Yeah,
very
nurturing. Yeah,
gentle and caring.
right.
But I love that she shows that not as something that makes him like a weak
Of
man.
course.
It's a part of his strength,
Right.
like that deep love and his willingness to do whatever he has to do for his
Yeah,
kids. It's just like really, I mean,
yeah,
he makes me cry every time because my heart
yeah.
breaks for
I
him.
will say, if there's one like clunker part of this book for me, I I did not. Okay, I'm vehemently pro-choice, everybody, and I
Yeah,
don't.
that hit a little
Yeah,
weird.
like sort of. So his first wife was basically like, they got the kill order for all the Lawrence, and he was like, well, she could have just left. She could have just turned them in. She could have just been like gone. But to add that
Yeah.
she like was pregnant and aborted this baby, and that broke his heart. I as a woman
Yeah.
just feel like, look, no romance ever has to paint that any of that in that light. And I will say,
Yeah.
if I were to read this book again, and I'm sure I will, I think I'm just gonna like pretend that scene didn't happen. It is the one thing in the book that I was like,
Yeah.
no, it didn't need to be there. I don't think it added anything.
Yeah. It felt kind of like an 80s or 90s category
Yes.
conflict of like
Right.
the devil's she woman from your past
Yes.
who aborted your child. And I think what she was going for, if I'm guessing, was this idea of like Walker, I think, thought they had one kind of
Right.
relationship and that act sort of represented to him,
Yeah.
oh no, like any illusion I had that we were sort of like partners
Right.
or like co-parents or whatever is just like
Right. But like I said,
that's just not a thing at all.
yeah.
But I agree. To me, it always pulls me out of the story a little bit. So I wish that I just wish that that wasn't there.
And I mean, I think frankly, like as much as I would like to say it's an 80 or 90s category romance thing, because God knows we came up and it still happens in contemporaries. And every time I'm like, however I felt about this book, you just went down to like, so I will say, I just needed to say that. I love everything about this book pretty much without reservation, except that. And I just feel like,
well, and I don't think it was even necessary. Again, like I see, taking a step back, I'm like, I think from a story perspective, I get why that was there, but I don't think it was even needed because I think even just her cold-heartedness of like, oh, I packed all my shit up, have fun dying, was plenty to show like she was not in it. She was not in their family the way that Walker thought she was.
And that's it. Exactly. I don't think that made her any less cold-hearted, that she walked away and was like, you're about to be killed. And so is our kid. Oh, well. Right. So anyway. Yeah. But I will say Walker and Laura still, his alpha male bullshit was great. And the part where she kisses him and he like pushes her away and she's like, oh, and then he knows he fucked up. Listen. Scares away the guy with the flowers. Listen, I know it's wrong. I climbed right into the garbage can and wallowed around in it because it was so great.
Well, I'm a sucker for a virgin hero, which is another reason why Side Changeling is such a great series for me. And so anytime there's like a virgin hero who is like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And you're going to enjoy every minute of me figuring it out. I'm like, I'm trash for this.
Oh, completely. Yeah. So great. So yeah, they were a great, and I will say it was a great secondary romance that I was really pleasantly surprised by. I don't know why I wasn't really expecting it at all. Because I feel like usually it's setting up the seeds for future books. Right. And I was like, oh, maybe they're just going to be the next book. And then I was like, oh, no, this is going to happen right here in the background. And I loved it.
And I think you get a little bit of a hint of it in book 9, but not really. It kind of came out of I remember the first time I read it being like, oh, I totally didn't put those two together, but I love this. They totally make sense again, because he's, sort of a very nurturing person. And then, she's obviously the pack healer. So therefore, the ultimate. I will also say something I very much enjoyed at the end of this book when Sienna is channeling all of her energy into the bonds. I love that solved the solution of like, how is Laura going to get enough energy to heal everyone? But then just from a comedic perspective, the fact that they were all like
falling over.
Oh, we've been in bed for 2 days.
Like we have so much energy. It's amazing. She's healed everybody. The kids aren't sleeping. Everyone's fucking. It's amazing.
It's
here. Okay. There is one thing I would like you to help me understand, because I feel like I was reading pretty fast at the end to be done in time. All right. At the end, when she goes full X, right? And she just burns everything to ash.
To the ground. Yes.
How is it that the pack members survive? Is it because at that point the bond had set in? I kind of was like, wait, I thought they were all dead, and then they weren't. So help me.
I think the way that my understanding of how this works is that when she pushes through Hawk's mind, and to her credit, this has been established in all the previous books, that there is some kind of psychic network within changelings that they are maybe not consciously aware of, but is like how the pack is cohesive. And so she knows that if she goes through Hawk's mind, she will be able to isolate every changeling in the vicinity that's connected to him. And so she basically shields. So I think how she doesn't get burned by her own fire.
And he doesn't either.
I think she's basically bringing them all into that same shield.
Okay.
So, now, the question that occurred to me this time around, I guess it's established that there were no Dark River people
near enough,
around.
Well, because they were kind of protecting the city. This particular spot
that's right,
was really so deep into Snowdancer territory that it was
it was just the Snowdancers. Okay, that was the only thing I was like, did we clearly establish there were no Dark River people around, because they wouldn't be part barbecue
of that,
Um, though I guess, Riley and Mercy are connected, so I don't know, maybe, but no, that was my understanding, was that she was able to sort of bring them into her
Okay.
own shield.
Okay, right.
I think that's how
And
that
maybe
worked.
it was even like accidental. I mean, I was kind of like, because I was sort of read it and I was like, I mean, I really was like, oh shit, she just burned them all. Woo. And then, but it does make sense. And I also think there was like that foreshadowing of that. At the beginning of the book, when there's like there's some like an incursion of sighs, and one of them is a pregnant woman,
Yes.
that it looks like the wolves are going to attack. And Judd is the one who's like, they might not have known, but, they were clearly not going to attack this pregnant woman. So it did make me think that there was a way that even in that like split second where like the attack was going to happen, that the power, I guess, of like that protectiveness of, the more vulnerable or your own pack would like almost be automatic. Like it's not something she consciously thought of. It just was built in to the system. Hawk wouldn't be able to harm his own people, and so she couldn't either, right? The fire just
Yes.
Do you ever it's wildfire season, and like firefighters out there have like these little like emergency tents that they like get into?
Yes.
I guess that's kind of how I pictured it, right?
And see, I'm kind of picturing what's her face from the X-Men.
Oh yeah.
In the second movie, where that was kind of the visual I had of it just consuming everything. But oh man, that I have to say, I've reread that scene many times, because it's just such a like, I am woman, hear me roar moment of like, because I feel like, and I mean, I think this is in the text, there is still at that point some level at which I think her fellow pack mates don't really respect how fucking powerful she is. Whereas like Judd, Sasha, all of the other side kind of get like, this she really is basically a nuclear bomb walking around. And just the like emotional satisfaction, it was the same satisfaction as a grovel for me, of just like, oh, now like now you see, and just that scene kills me every time.
I think I mean, so the thing I loved too is then like the reveal that like the valve, like the pressure valve on her power, is essentially her own family.
Yes.
And I think it makes sense to me that then you were saying like we're going to see the Psy kind of develop these too, right? Like they, in an effort to sort of stop the things about themselves, they turned away from the very thing that was they had their own packs essentially, right? So that totally makes sense to me, and I really loved it. But I think I would also say, I was like, okay, emotionally I was very satisfied by like literally like, of course, this crucible of fire is how their mating bond is going to click into place. Like, of course, it's not going to be like other
literal trial by fire,
right? But I think that the thing that then was really important to me at the end was this like conversation where, he gives her the empty box, the key, and says, like, I love you. Like, listen.
It kills me.
That was all.
It was like he actually said the words of the grovel, because often that's my biggest thing, is when the grovel doesn't match the crime. And I think a lot of authors would not have put that scene in, because there would have been this implied,
it happened, it's fine.
But I love that she understands that like it would be it's so much more satisfying to me to see him make that gesture and say
those words. Exactly. So I will say it was, I give her a lot of credit. I think plotting wise, I like books with a lot of plot, but you can't end with the pillar of fire, right? You have to bring us back down. And the way that we get sort of the comic relief of them all being like super energized, and then but also then this like truly like tender moment between the two of them, and when she says to him like, you're never going to be my alpha, we are always going to be equals, and then like his wolf is all happy, like, listen, it's amazing, so good.
It doesn't take a lot to make me happy, honestly. It doesn't. It's just like
perfect, so good.
Well, and I think it's also just in terms of the series. She's just because I asked her when I was interviewing her, I was like, "Do you?" In my mind, she has like a cork board with
Right, like
like
a
a red
murder wall,
string,
right?
and she doesn't. I don't think she doesn't. It seems like her process is actually much more
Yeah,
intuitive than that, which honestly shocked me.
amazing,
But
right?
I think she has this nice pacing too with this book of, there's been this build over the last really like 4 or 5
Mm-hmm.
books. And this feels like a real payoff of the macro
Yeah,
plot. But then the next book, we have like, because you've read book 12, so you
yes,
know that that book is a
yeah.
lot for the macro
Ooh.
plot. But the next book is another kind of with the pack kind of
Mm-hmm.
book, and you get a little bit of breathing
Yeah,
room. So I also just love that she has this sort of
yes,
instinctive macro
right.
pacing where she ramps and ramps, and then you get this like,
Sure, big
you know
literal explosion, right?
literal explosion in this book, and then she kind of lets you ramp a little bit again.
Breathe a
She
little.
does such a good
Yeah,
job of
right,
pacing her series as a whole in a way that makes you keep reading but doesn't just have you like boom 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 boom
right,
boom all the
right.
time.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I mean, I think that Cressley in Immortals After Dark does that pretty well too. I definitely think,
Mm-hmm.
like build up to like certain books that is just amazing. But yeah, I agree. Like you can't go from this book to Heart of Obsidian. You can't. You need to take a breath. And you also, I think the other thing that she like intuitively really understands is you have the big explosion happens. You got to let all that settle and then figure out like, okay, like what's happening next. So it makes a
Yeah,
lot of
like let
sense
the
to me.
implications actually
Play out.
play out.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that's been really interesting for me because I read it backwards. I'm like, I know a lot of things, but it doesn't matter. Spoilers don't bother me in that way. Instead, I just found
Yeah, I'm the
myself
same way.
instead really admiring the craft because I was like, wow, I see where she's going with
Yeah.
this, but the pieces of this are being laid so far back, right?
So
Yeah.
early. Yeah. I think if you're a romance reader, you're
Sure.
instinctively a how
Always.
reader, not a what reader.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is a great example of like, okay, I know that this is a romance
Right.
series, so I know everything's going
Right.
to be okay,
Right.
but she is just an absolute master
Yeah.
in
She's amazing.
keeping you having so much suspense on the way to what you kind of know is an inevitable
But it
conclusion.
doesn't matter. It's like, how are you going to get there? Right. And even though we talked about like, there are some books where like the plot is similar, that journey for those characters is so different. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
so, this book is not like Judd's book, but I will tell you, this book really did. I was like, at every level that a book can work, it worked for me. It's like, let me throw you up against a tree. Okay.
Yeah. It's not my best trope
Yeah.
candy or my sort of like core
Right.
story, but it still works so well for me because it's that good of a
Right.
book.
Right.
Okay, I wanted to interject quickly. I just realized I forgot to mention this when Jen and I were talking, but I do think that this book, in terms of motifs, really is hitting the play motif very hard. And I think I have a new kind of understanding or theory about what play represents in Nalini Singh's world. And I think it's this idea of sort of joyful vulnerability. That I think is kind of the idea that play is meant to represent. And so for Hawk and Sienna, who are they both have had these really serious lives where they've had responsibility thrust upon them at a very young age, and they've had to grow up very quickly. Hawk at least had his pack to kind of bring out some playfulness in him, but Sienna didn't really even have that. And so this idea of both of them, for Sienna, I think even learning how to play, and then Hawk feeling open and vulnerable enough with her to be able to play with her and kind of be outside of the pack hierarchy that he is at the top of, I think is a really lovely theme that gets really drilled home in this book, possibly more than almost any other. I would say Play of Passion, which even has play in the title, also was really drilling into this. But that kind of layering of a motif, I think, really got taken to the next level in this book and was really moving and lovely. I thought that was very well executed as sort of a unifying kind of a motif or repetition between the two lovers. Oh, and I totally forgot, guys, to have Jen and I do the ratings, so I will do that really quickly. For cozy community vibes, I would give this a 10 out of 10 pack night out at the local bar, getting crazy. There is like a ton of really lovely moments between the pack mates with Snow Dancer. I think the fact that they all live together in that den particularly lends itself to just really good cozy community vibes. But there's also all this lovely, stuff with the different pack mates helping Sienna like get ready for dates or figure out how to kind of deal with. It's just lovely. It's very cozy, very community oriented, this one. I would also give this a 10 out of 10 epic Changeling battle, because this is a ton of political machinations and the payoff of some tension that has been ramping up really for the last like 5 books. So I would definitely say that this is heavy on political machinations. I would give this probably a 9 out of 10 sexy virginity takings. I don't know, sexy times in a cabin. How about that? This is a very sexy book. It has a lot of sexual tension that just ramps and ramps and ramps. And when that pays off, I think that the love scenes are very effective and move the characters forward. They're not just sexy, they also are very rich with their character work. And then I'm going to give this 10 out of 10. My designation means that I can't lives. I mean, literally, Sienna thinks that she was born to die. So this is pretty damn angsty. So I think that this is a book that kind of maxes out on all of my scale metrics. So that's what I would give it for kind of those individual metrics. And then overall, I have to give this a 5 out of 5 stars. This is an all-time favorite paranormal / sci-fi romance for me. I think it's just incredibly strong, and it's a great example to me of a book in a series that is highly anticipated by its fans that actually feels super satisfying when that book comes around. You don't always get that. Sometimes you get sort of that build up to a book, and then when it actually happens, people are like, oh, that felt a little anticlimactic. I think this one totally sticks it, and when we see Hawk and Sienna coming together, it's just very satisfying for longtime readers of the series. Well,
thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming. Is there anything we didn't cover that you need to express about this book?
I was made for war. It's a great line.
There's got to be some Redbubble fan art of that somewhere. Yeah.
No, I love this book. I am definitely going to keep reading. I'm really excited to read Heart of Obsidian, knowing all the things I know now.
Yes.
But before that, Cooper.
You're gonna just love it. That whole collection, actually, I think it's called Wild Invitation. Yeah. All 4 of the novellas in that are
I'm super excited
bangers.
About that.
They're so good.
Where I am right now.
Yeah. She excels at a novella.
She excels at everything.
She excels. Have you read her thrillers? I don't know do you read thrillers at all?
Yeah. I mean, I've read. Sure. I mean, yes, I will read. I like Jack Reacher books. Those are my favorite thrillers. Those are not romances, but
hey, it's all. I mean,
talk about some alpha male bullshit right there. Bam.
Yeah, exactly. Well, all that to say, her thrillers are also very good.
I'm sure she's amazing. She can do whatever she wants.
Yeah, she's truly a queen who can do. I don't think I've ever read a bad book. I have books I like better,
of course,
than others, but I don't think I've ever read a bad book.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure. Always so fun.
I am just so excited I had someone to fully gush about this book with, because, it deserves gushing. And where can people find you?
I am on Twitter at JenReadsRomance. You can listen to me every week talk with this kind of speed and ridiculousness on Fated Mates with my co-host, romance author Sarah McLean. And our Twitter is Fated Mates, and our Instagram is Fated Mates Pod.
Yes. And if I think the number of people who are listening to this and not Fated Mates is probably vanishingly small. But if you haven't listened to Fated Mates, what are you doing? Get your life together and
get your life together and get over there. We're super fun. And season 4 of Fated Mates is coming soon. And I can't say what it's going to be, but it's going to be awesome.
I cannot wait. Well, I don't know if you guys will ever actually do this, but I loved season 1 so much of like having,
Like a
well,
read
again,
along, yeah.
obviously inspired the format of this
Mhm.
podcast. But I'm hoping you guys will pick another series to read at some
It's
point
not going to be in
because
season 4, but you never know. Maybe one day. But yeah.
one day,
I
one
think
day,
the thing
fingers
that we
crossed.
have sort of figured out is we've gone from being like an IAD podcast to just like a romance podcast. And
Yeah,
that's really fun. We do a lot of tropes where we're like, hey, we're going to talk about morality chain. And here's a bunch of, if you love this, here are other books you'll love. So we're also like, your TBR will never be the same.
that's the thing. You should not listen to this podcast unless you are fully prepared to spend some money and or just put a bunch of holds on at the
You know
library.
what?
You guys got me to read Reese Ryan, which
See,
was
Reese Ryan's great. It's a service we
yeah,
provide.
exactly.
Thank you so
You're
much
doing
for
the good
having
work.
me. It was so fun.
Yes, thank you so much. And you guys will be back with me in 2 weeks, and we will talk about Cooper's novella, which is 9.5, called, I think, Dance Invitation, something about inviting to dance. And then Texture of Intimacy, which is 10.5, and that is Walker and Laura's extended HEA. So
Perfect.
I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks. And thanks for listening. Bye.